have never desired your good opinion.
People fear what they do not understand.
I have a headache, a badge, and a gun.
Power is yours.
Behave.
I was just trying to start a conversation.
And share the wonders I've seen.
Hi, and welcome to The Wonders I've Seen, where there's no such thing as weird or normal. There's just different. I'm your host, Tanagra, and today we'll be discussing CW's Charmed. My liquid nourishment for the day is tea. All the tea for this show. Specifically, Harney & Sons Fine Tea's Pumpkin Spice, sticking with the season. Herbal Red Bush with pumpkin and spices. No caffeine, because I should not feed my addiction. So, sit back, get your tea, and enjoy these wonders. Alright, so the CW's Charmed was a huge show for me when it first premiered back in the day. The original one. I am, full disclosure, the youngest of three sisters, and the idea of a show about three women who have their own issues in life, and they don't really have the best relationships, but something about learning about their history brings them together, touched very strongly on me and my heart. And as the youngest sister, the fact that Phoebe was like, we're witches, we should do this, we'll be together, it'll make us closer, that was her approach to learning about witchcraft. I was like, yes, that's me, I'm her. Not like the sexy bit, because I was pretty young, but the idea of the witchcraft and a shared history bringing them together. So I loved that show. When it even started going off the rails a little bit more as it progressed, I still loved it. I watched Charmed from beginning to end. I've only ever done that with one other show, and that's Xena. I usually get sick of shows, or you know how television is. If it's on too long, it starts to lose meaning. And Charmed wavered a bit, but ultimately they always came back to the idea of family and working together and loving, supporting each other, and then trying to do what was best for both each other and also the world. And then sometimes, even if it meant sacrificing something they wanted, still doing what was better for the world as a whole. So when this show was announced, I really was not that excited about it, mostly because I'm tired of reboots. There is space for originality, but also because I just have a sense of nostalgia and a love for the original. Then CW started all the promotions, and it was like, Latinx, witches everywhere, three sisters, feminism, Latinx, the big thing for me. And I was like, oh my God, Latinx witches. Are we going to get some brujeria? Are we going to get some santeria or lucumi? Like, are we just going to go like the Mexican route and then have them like praying to La Virgen de Guadalupe, but at the same time calling on La Llorona to like smite the men in their lives? Like, I was so excited for it. Then they dropped the term that there was going to be like Black Latinx, and I was like, oh my God! Like, which country? Because every country had slaves in it. So which country are they going to come from? Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. Like, I was invested. All of Latin Twitter was invested. Black Twitter was excited for this. Like, because there's obviously a lot of crossover as a result of being Black American and Black Latin myself. I am a product of that crossover and merging. Like, I was so invested in this. I started to get a little bit worried, though, when they kept talking about the feminism, this show's going to have the feminism, and I was like, okay, did nobody watch the original Charmed? Because the entire premise of Charmed was feminist. I didn't need you to be like, and now we're feminist, and now these three witches are feminists, because everything that they did was, like, I never doubted, like, Piper and Prue and Phoebe were feminists. And yes, I am going to focus on the original three, because since we're comparing the beginning of one show to the original, that sort of established it. So I didn't need to hear that. Like, I saw Prue going out and doing her job. I saw Phoebe, like, yeah, she was wild, not the most stable, but she knew who she was, and she was in the process of figuring it out. Like, I saw Piper, like, yeah, she was waitressing, but she also didn't take shit. Like, I think it's in one of the first episodes where there's a guy at the club that she's working at, and either he sexually assaults her or says something that's highly inappropriate to her, and she handles it. And, like, I didn't need them to be like, look, this is how feminist she is, because it was just so integral to everything that the characters were about. And maybe that has more to do with the fact that, I don't know if the show was more more thought out, or maybe the writers were just better writers. I'm not really sure what it was, but there was no Charmed, the new CW feminist show, when it came out. It was simply Charmed. And when you watched that show, you knew those women were feminist. I didn't need anybody to tell me. And having watched the first 3 episodes, yes, the first 3 episodes, because I am not going to be watching this show anymore, there is a sense of performative feminism and performative intersectional feminism to this new show that the original Charm did not have. They're constantly dropping terms, social justice warrior, which once again, I highly ascribe to that term myself. And if you call me that, I'll tell you thank you. But they're constantly dropping the terms, talking about not being her, talking about Me Too. There's a part in the 3rd episode where the middle sister, I don't even remember her name, it's not worth it, is like, don't take my idea, white man. And it's the first time you've ever even really heard them talk about culture or ethnicity or like race in a show that was promoted as being Latinx witches. And that's highly problematic, because to be any ethnicity in the United States and to be aware of it, especially in these times, it means that everything you do, especially when you're a woman, is intersectional feminism. Like, you don't get to say that I'm a feminist and not be intersectional, because if you're not an intersectional feminist, then ultimately you're just upholding the standards of white supremacy that have been perpetuated throughout the decades and centuries. So you have to talk about one and the other together. There is no separating them out. And the fact that the sister, who is supposed to be the activist, who is the middle child, the first time that she ever even mentions this is when she's like talking to the white lighter. It feels very false and fake. Then you have the oldest sister, who I had to look up to see what type of scientist she was supposed to be, because she spends a lot of time doing some chemistry, but she's apparently supposed to be a genealogist. Now, I appreciate the fact that they have a woman of color who's doing well in her field, who's highly established and respected. I also like the idea of trying to approach magic with the twist of science, but thus far, all it's been is her discounting magic for science. And I'm like, okay, I get it that she's skeptical, but some things can't be explained. And also, if the point of this show was supposed to be the magic that brings them together, then why are you trying to say that the magic doesn't actually exist when it's what binds them? So that for me is a little bit problematic. Actually, it's really problematic. I don't know why I tried to downplay that. But I was like, you know what? Okay, you're going to downplay it. I can appreciate the fact that you're showing a woman who's successful in her scientific career, because I appreciate that. We need more female role models in the hard sciences, particularly. And then we have the youngest sister, who spends all of her time pledging, which, I mean, I'm far removed from, I think she's supposed to be like 18, 19. I barely even remember that age at this point. I'm not that I'm so old, but I didn't pledge. I did not do any of that stuff as an undergraduate. I was an undergraduate and I read books and I talked to my professors and I hung out with my friends, but pledging just seemed like a way to join a cult where they all looked the same, which kudos to them at least for not doing that. In this show, they put some diversity into the pledge class. We'll see if that actually stays as she becomes a whatever, choose a Greek letter that she's becoming. But she's sort of so busy trying to be liked by these people and having her insecurities that she's not really focused on being a witch. And I was like, okay, sure, we're just going to blame that on age, but that character development better hurry the fuck up, because that's going to be really annoying to try and watch. And after 3 shows, it is really fucking annoying to try and watch. And I know 3 is not a long time, y'all, but it's enough, because there's enough other issues outside of the fact that the genealogist actually seems to be more familiar with chemistry, that the activist seems to be more, not so much an activist, but just like, this is what I should be mad about, so I'm mad about it, and her activism isn't intersectional, and that the young girl, the young sister, well, I mean, she's annoying and young, so sure, why not? Let's go with that in the stereotype of millennials. Are young millennials or whatever generation, 18 and 19-year-olds now. I don't know. The titles keep changing. So, sure. But on top of that, it's also, in addition to all of that, the fact that there is no representation of the culture, period. Like, there's nothing. And I know that they're supposed to be Latina because the CW made a big fucking deal about it, but there's nothing. Like, they don't mention it. There's no dropping of Spanish words anywhere. Even the mom, even if they, like, the idea that there being a difference of your culture between generations, I would have loved to seen that. If they would have started with the mom is speaking Spanish to them and they answer her in English, totally would have been on board for that. I'm not saying that I needed the entire show to be bilingual, although I would have loved that. Like, there are ways to work it in that are so organic that it doesn't need to be made a big deal of. Just like the feminism, it's not performative. It's not, I'm doing this so you know. It's not, I'm shouting from the rooftops with the waving a flag so you know that, like, you know, this is what I believe. It's just who you are. Like, and the fact that they that they seem to be able to do that with, like, the middle sister's, like, lesbianism. Like, she just has a relationship and it's like, okay, cool, that's the thing. Like, I love the approach of that, but I wish they would have done that with the fact that they're supposed to be Latina, with the fact that they're supposed to be some version of feminist, like, all of them. But you don't get that. Like, it's just sort of thrown in your face. It feels so performative. Like, the CW is like, see, look how aware we are. Look, we made them Latina, although it's not a part of their culture. They're witches, although they actually have been solving everything with science. Like, oh, they're sisters, although they're not really doing anything to bond. Like, everything just seems so performative. Like, the CW just wants us to clap and be like, blended families, yay, Latinas who aren't aware of their culture. Like, okay, but we're not even gonna talk about the fact that they're not aware of their culture because they literally don't talk about it at all. Yay, feminists, yay, activists, yay. Like, the CW wants applause, and that's not the point of being those things. That's not the point of doing a show about these issues. It's to, if you're not educating people, if the point of the show isn't to educate people about those issues, then it should be to relate with people who are fighting for those things, who do identify in that way. And I gotta say, I don't think they're doing either at all. For me, this show had so much potential. I was so looking forward to it, but the fact that they're not recognizing the culture, that the feminism does feel very performative, that they don't even really focus on the relationship between the three sisters, it takes away everything that made the original so good. And yes, the original, they were just like white women living in, I don't know, I always assumed it was like Seattle, I gotta be honest. With that intro song, it was definitely Seattle. And then like the house and the nature everywhere, I just assumed it was. Like, the fact that they don't even touch on that is problematic. Like, they sort of mentioned in the third episode where the oldest sister was talking about how it was her and another female, and they were the two minorities and decided what type of minority you wanted to be. And like, that's it. And you're like, oh, are we getting, no, we're just gonna have this little interlude and then that's it. Okay, all right, cool. So we talked about the fact that we're women of color. Okay, thanks for those 2 minutes. But that, nothing else. And then when the mom was around, so this is gonna get into the casting a bit, but when the mom is there, she doesn't speak Spanish, on top of the fact that they chose like the Latina actress, and the actress who plays the mother is Latina. She's Cuban, but they chose a Latina actress who actively doesn't look, quote unquote, like she's anything but white. And I'm so used to Hollywood doing that I'm just like, oh, I'm not surprised. But the fact that the CW has ultimately capitalized off of all the hype that the Latin community and POC, but particularly the Latin community, built off of the idea of having representation on a show and of our culture, is such an issue for me. Like, you could have gotten somebody who, quote unquote, looked a little bit more like they're actually Latina, or like had an accent. At this point, I don't fucking care from what country, like something. But you picked the Latina that looks the most white possible. And then I was like, oh, is she a Latina who's supposed to be playing like a white woman? And each of them has like different POC fathers, because it's implicit right now that the oldest sister's dad is black. And I was like, oh, so are we gonna do like the mom is white? Because since the mom is the witch, right? Like, this is my hope / theory. Since the mom is the witch and the witchcraft that she practices is European, that inherently means that she is not Latina, that they were not trying to craft a Latina witch, but rather a white witch of European descent. So I was like, oh, well, maybe the dads are going to be the Latinos, right? Like, I don't know, maybe each of them has a different father or something like that. Like, something to salvage this basic, like, erasure and abuse of the trust that the Latin community placed in this show to represent us. I am tired, one, of all Latinos on television, none of them ever being anything but your stereotypical Hollywood acceptable, y'all cannot see my air quotes, Latinas. Like, there is such an array. To say that you are Latinx is like saying that you're black. You can be from fucking anywhere. You can look like anything. You can be any shade, have any hair color, any skin color, any eye color. We are not a monolith. And I say we as a Latina, and I say we as a black person. There is a spectrum. There is a range. And Hollywood, even when they try to capitalize off of that, still sticks to this stereotype of what it looks like, what it being, what Latinidad looks like, what blackness looks like. Like, they still won't go that extra mile. And I was really hoping that the CW would do better, if nothing but because they have been sort of trying to put themselves out there as better, doing shows like Riverdale, although, you know, they sort of messed up on that one anyway, but that's a whole nother podcast. But doing shows like Black Lightning, which I was like, y'all have got it together. Y'all are doing so much better. You know, trying to have diversity on shows, on all their DC shows. They put that effort out there, and then when they're like, okay, well, now we're going to purposely make a show around this culture, around these 3 Latina women, I was like, yes. And then they fail. And in all honesty, I don't even really think they tried, especially given the fact that 2 of the sisters aren't even Latina. Like, you're acting like there aren't Black Latina actresses out there looking for work. You're acting like there aren't Latina actresses who are, you know, from whatever country or background looking for work. Like, we exist, we're out there, and yet you find one and you're like, okay, the other sort of looks similar. They're, you know, not too black, not too white. We're just gonna throw them in there and call them Latina. Like, come on. Like, your writing is bad enough. The least you could have done is cast some Latinas in the damn roles. Like, so basic. So basic. But anyway, I digress. And the tea is still piping hot. I don't want to get too angry on this podcast. But let me know what you think about the new Charmed. I know some people think that it's better because it's not as cheesy. And I mean, I grew up loving the old Charmed. The cheese was one of the reasons I liked it. Piper is still one of my favorite witches to this day. I also really liked Prue. But Piper was like the shit. Like, Holly Marie Combs for life as far as that goes. I was really hoping that, you know, if they were going to do this again, that they would at least like include her and include Alyssa Milano, because they were producers. Like, on the last couple of seasons of Charmed, I remember seeing their names on the screen and being like, fuck yeah, female producers. Like, it was just awesome to see them forming their own worlds in which they were acting and creating and having a say. And I loved that. And even if the show was sometimes sort of wobbly, the fact that they believed in it came through. And that's probably one reason why I kept watching it. And this show just doesn't have that. Nothing about that. It calls to me. It doesn't speak to me, like, as a feminist, as a woman of color, as a POC, as a Latina, like, as somebody who's spiritual and not Christian. Like, it just doesn't speak to me at all. And maybe these first 3 episodes have been really, 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 really rough. Maybe they fire the writer. Maybe there's a different writer. I don't know what they need to do, but I am hoping that it improves. But until the CW shows that the feminist angle is more than performative, that the racial and appeal to the Latina community, particularly, once again, the Latina community, because they said the show was going to star Latinas, until they appeal to my community more, I don't think it's going to get better, and it's going to continue to feel fake and performative and forced. I mean, and I don't know what they need to do so these actresses have more chemistry with each other, because they sure as crap don't have it now. And then, like, on top of that, casting like a white British male to be their guide. Are you fucking kidding me? Are you fucking kidding me? Like, you didn't even think maybe we should get a POC to be their guide? Like, really? Really? The person who has the most knowledge is the white British male? Like, y'all, the colonialism runs deep, doesn't it? Like, ugh. Anywho, I had so many dreams for this show. I don't think there's a way to fix it. If the Twitters tell me that it's getting better, then maybe I'll tune in, but I doubt it. Yeah. Actually, the Twitters have been telling me to watch Big Mouth with Maya Rudolph, who I love, so that's probably what my next episode is going to be about. Anywho, tell me your thoughts on Charmed. Do you have hope for it to change? Do you feel like the CW abused the hope of the Latinx community by selling this as a new Charmed with Latina leads? Let me know. I do think that they've done the lesbian relationship well, but past that, I think it's all problematic. Yeah. Also, the idea that the activist is like, fuck the old guard or whatever. I can't even remember right now. However, the white lighters answer to, screw them. I'm gonna do it my way. The council doesn't know anything. As though, like, to be an activist means you have to throw away everything that's happened before you, which is also problematic in what that implies. Anywho, Lord, I apparently could keep going. So let me know what your thoughts on Charmed are. Once again, do you hope it will get better? Do you feel betrayed? Do you even care about this show? I have some friends, particularly my POC friends, who are like, fuck that, I'm not watching it, because they started off by lying anyway. Yeah. Do you think it's feminist? Do you think it's performative? I mean, you know my thoughts. I'd love to hear yours. Yeah, no, I really do want to hear them. I won't start a fight with you on Twitter. It's not my style. So let me know what you think. You can find me on Twitter at Tanagra, GGNOC. If you're an Android user, you can find me on Anchor and RadioPublic. If you're an iTunes user, you can find us on iTunes and Overcast. And don't forget, you can also watch our slideshows and subscribe on YouTube. We're also starting to do random rabbit viewings on also starting to do random rabbit viewings for Twist Wonder Watches. I'll be announcing them on Twitter at TanagraGGNOC. So leave us a message on some platform. Send me a chat, send me a DM. I want to know your thoughts. Suggest a movie, suggest a show. We'll talk. So thanks for joining. Make choices and don't frol it up like the CW did.